Welcome back to the Profit School by Measure You podcast. This is, of course, the Business Unfiltered edition, a conversation between myself, Chris Mercer, and my buddy Jeff Sauer, who is left or right, up or down on this particular video. And what we're talking about today is all about how to break bottlenecks in an AI-first business. And of course, I have a funny suspicion we're going to be talking about how to use AI to do that. So, Mr. Sauer, as is our tradition, what are you thinking about when you're talking about bottlenecks and kind of the AI-first business? How do we define those?
Yeah, the first thought is, isn't AI supposed to be the thing that gets rid of the bottlenecks? So how can you still have bottlenecks when you're an AI-first business? Yet, I know that that exists, and I know that that happens all the time, and I still can be a bottleneck even though I am AI first. And so I think that it really comes around to, what are the limiting beliefs around that? How is your organization structured? And then how are you actually making this happen in a way that makes you AI first? So I'm really happy and excited to unpack this because I'm definitely the guy who still creates bottlenecks, not as many. I've definitely done an AI first business, but it is sometimes a challenge to get past that and to make that happen. Maybe it's because of the state of technology and we're right now. Maybe it's the wrong techniques, but I love my systems guy, Mercer, to help me unpack some of this stuff too. Maybe we'll get some breakthroughs even more as we talk about our own problems and then help you solve your problems too.
I love that. Yeah, I think for me, it comes down to what we talk about a lot in Profit School, which is when you're managing your team members, when you're managing yourself, we use that CNC rule, right? And the rule of that CNC rule basically says there's two main things we can focus on. One is our capability, right? For ourselves, our company, our team, whatever the capability is that you're focusing on at whatever level. And then you've got capacity, how much time we have to do the things that we have the capability to do. So capability and capacity and that CNC rule is sort of the idea. And that's, I think, going back to the idea of like, how do you identify bottlenecks? It's in one of those two areas. It's going to be either we don't have the capability, right? Or I don't, or they don't, right? Type of thing. If it's a team member, or yourself as an owner. And then there's the capacity. I don't have the time to do this, or they don't have they could do it, but they don't have the time because they're focusing on other priorities, And so Ned, that's, I think, how you could maybe identify some of the bottlenecks, or at least that's the idea, right? Between that, kind of looking at capability and capacity. And the beauty of AI is that it can dramatically affect both. And it's getting like every freaking hour, it gets better and better at that. At helping, like, oh, now I have more capability and now I can help us do stuff. Like right now, we can't necessarily talk. I mean, that's not true. Right now, you could talk to it and get a web page built, but it would be a little clunky and not quite perfect and definitely wouldn't be like something you could like fire and forget and be done with. But in a couple of years, that's I think a no-brainer. That's exactly what's going to happen, right? Again, if web pages are even a thing in a couple of years. But it's like, but that the power, it's using the power of AI. And this is where the AI first business comes in. Remember, Profit School, it's all about AI first thinking, which is not just like, well, how do I do this? It's how do I do this using AI, right? Using that mech suit that is AI, that really enhances both capability and our capacity to get some more done. So that's sort of how I kind of look at that. From a definitional perspective. I'm curious, when you mentioned limiting beliefs, I kind of wrote that down, like limiting beliefs. Like, tell me more about that. Like, what were you thinking of? Is it around like when you think limiting beliefs, are you thinking like somebody's presupposed what AI can and cannot do? And so because of that, now they don't see their bottleneck because they don't even know. They just think that's just how life is. They don't see it as a bottleneck. They just see it as I'm limited. Does that make sense? Like bottleneck is something where you're like, I know I can go beyond, but I'm stuck, but I can see the next step. And a limit is, oh, maybe this is just the limit. It's not a bottleneck. It's just the end of the thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good way to look at it. So in my opinion, the limiting belief for me specifically is around, I'm still the best one to do it. Even if I can get capability into somebody's hands, are they as capable as me? So it's like, and that's both a true thing and a theoretical thing, right? Like I'm getting better at it, but ultimately, like how far do I have to push something along before I trust that somebody can get the same result as me? Like how much do you have to do that thing? How much nurturing and babysitting do you have to have? Because I know that people, like, ultimately, if I don't shift the capability, if I don't pay that forward or delegate the capability, then I'll always be a bottleneck. Right. So it's, so how do I think with AI, and we just talked about it on our AI agents episode, our last episode, about like these agents are pretty good. They have the specialty knowledge. So they have almost infinite capability. If they're a good one and you use it, then, okay, well then if they have infinite capability in that thing, then I can trust to them. But can I trust to humans that I would have infinite capability as well using these tools? Or is the 20 years of experience doing this, is that where I can see that immediately and then somebody else can struggle with it? And then am I better off trying to teach that to somebody now? Or do I invest in, do I double down on teaching, giving more capability through feedback to AI versus feedback to my team? And so it's this interesting thing. It's like, okay, well, what's the more worthwhile thing? Should I give AI that feedback so that it does me the result now, and then it gives me more capacity, like way more capacity, because I'm not talking to team members?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're at a weird point right now, I think, where sometimes I think that who am I giving that feedback to, and am I increasing the capability of these tools or the people, and then how do I balance that?
So let's walk through like a real example in your head, that you've kind of done, and I'm going to ask you that if this is an example of that, like would creating like an email series be an example of what you're talking about here, where you would think, well, you're the one with the experience, you're the marketer, right? You've got decades of experience as I do, right, with this. And we know what a good email is or is not almost intuitively now.
Yep.
And so we're working with AI because it'll help us to get an email series out. And we know what good looks like, so we can kind of do all of that. And the question becomes, well, should we have maybe, like hire a VA that we can create a little agent that does the emails, and the VA just uses the agent, so now they can also get the same level of emails that we can, right? Because now that's where you're improving their capability by giving them this tool, but it's inherently your capability packaged in AI, right? Using AI to say, okay, this is the thing because you're the one that built it, presumably, right? Or found the tool or whatever that is likely to mimic it. And so that's sort of how I think it can break out of moving it from yourself and the other ones into somebody else's hands. But I get the idea, which is what I think you're communicating, which is like, yeah, but they're going to create something 80% as good, and I can just do the 100% right now. It might take me 2 minutes to do it. So why give them that extra work? I guess the way I look at it is, and this goes back to that bottleneck. Let's say you got 500 emails you got to get out. Well, what if the capability wasn't, I have the capability of getting an email written, right? A good performing email, finished email. That's not how you think about the capability. It's not at the email level, but it's at the, okay, I'm going to give it to the gem that gives me the 80% of the email hook and angles and general concept. And that's something that the team does. That's something that the gems do. That's something that the ChatGPT assistance does, whatever. It gives you that good enough 85%. You're almost there. And then because you didn't work at all on that, let's say that the, VAs or somebody else can do all of that. It gets sent back to you then as the owner. And now you're looking at it, or the marketer role, if that's, a company, in this case, it would be both. Then you're looking at it going, okay, I'm seeing these emails for the very first time, the 85% hook, and then you can just polish it. But you didn't have to do anything around the initial prompting of getting the email. Somebody else is already giving it to you. You're coming in and you're just going, yeah, I can just use your superpowers for just this little polished part, right? That sharpening of the edge of the email type of thing versus the core creation of it and thinking about what the product's going to be sold, all that stuff. Because that doesn't have to be you. That could just be anybody would know that. Like, does that help kind of mentally figure out a way to get around the bottleneck? Because you're like, oh, well, I don't need to figure out how to get emails done. I just need to figure out how to get the bottom part of the email process. Other people can do that, and I can just do the top part,
Yeah, the funny thing is that process we're talking about right there is the reason for the bottleneck. It's because 80 to 85% still means a lot of work to get it polished. It's not just simply you can polish it. It's hours and hours of work. If we were at 95%, then it would be good. And that's actually what I've been able to do with people, with copywriters before. It takes about a year or more to get them to give me 95% stuff with constant feedback. Now it doesn't take that with AI. Like, again, I'm using a tool that completely made it so that I'm working with somebody who I had trained for 3 years, and I have that right there, right now, and I can even chat with them and get it better. I can give them that feedback, and it gets it so much better. So instead of getting 85% and then me stressing out over like, oh, I have to look at this thing and it's wrong, and I have to make sure that I verify our product details, even though that should have been handed to me that way. I had to make sure that they get the dates right, that they don't hallucinate facts. I have to look at everything and verify it. I just bottleneck it because I don't want to verify that thing because it's like I'm not in that mode. I was just I thought that I'd have an email that made sure that I you know what I mean? Like, maybe that's too much to expect, but I have to still be the one that's the final accountability on it. And so what we've been doing now, I think the next wave of it is that I'm creating the emails with an AI agent, then I'm handing it to the team who knows more about the product and everything like that to make sure that's good and to make sure that's there. But I know that it's copywritten well. I know that it matches what I want to say or what I think we should say. I know that it's research. It hits on the emotional triggers. And now it's up to the rest of the team to say, is that what our product actually does? And when do we want to send this out? So that was a huge shift, is that if I can get that thing handed to me, then I can trickle it down the team. I'm no longer a bottleneck because I don't need to see it again. I verified my part. And so like that's where the iteration has been pretty challenging, but also empowering. Like that's the difference between our homegrown systems in Gemini with like gems and some of these things we're doing, is that they're dealing with the known knowns, but not the unknowns, which the specialty knowledge has. Like a specialty copywriter would have done research for you and you would have verified it. They would have interviewed your customers. And we're using deep research to create our avatars. And we're getting that's like a 90% of the way their avatar. This other thing probably gives us 90% as well. But it still takes that piece to get it going. And then it's really linking the stuff together after that makes it to that point. And it's like, do you build that system? Do you buy it? Do you rent it? Or do you teach your team how to do it? In the past, you had to teach the team, and that creates a bottleneck just in time, right? Now you have
especially pure before AI. Like
exactly.
It was like humans teaching humans how to do stuff.
Yep. Yeah. Now you have infinite capacity because the speed of AI, the capability that's the question. Actually, to me, its capability. It used to be that a virtual assistant was about 10% capable. A virtual assistant with AI is probably 80 to 85% capable, what we're talking about. Yeah. A 5-year, 10-year career person is at that 95% mark with AI.
Yeah.
Right. And then they're just getting more speed. So it's really adjusting to that and then saying, okay, so I actually, what I've been doing, Mercer, is I'm starting to come up with the Loom rule or whatever you use for short form videos that you send to your team. And if I can get to this process where I know that if I record on Loom for 5 to 10 minutes and every answer is there, every question is answered and everybody can do it, then that's when I hand it over. So that's when I do the delegation of it, is when it's a Loom video away.
What's on this video when you're like in your head, when you're doing the video? What do you like? Kind of give an example.
Yeah. So usually it's me doing this for the 7th time or the 10th time. I'm like, yeah, I've done this a bunch. Hey, here's the process. For creating a YouTube video, the Loom video will be, hey, here's how I select a topic. I go into vidIQ and I put in what I'm talking about, and then I keep on changing the title until they give me a good title score. Then I have it generate the keywords. Then I have it generate the script. Then I take that script and I put it into Google Docs and I review it to make sure that it matches our product. Then I actually record this thing and then pass it on to our editor. And so I show them how we do that. And it takes 5 to 10 minutes. And it's like, here's how we do this video. And all the questions are answered. The process is pretty locked in. I tell them how I deal with the exceptions. And that is basically me. It's the same as having a meeting with somebody. It's just that it's recorded and they can go back to it over and over again. Yeah. And that's what has actually happened, is I got rid of like 90% of my tasks on creating a YouTube video by the Loom video trick. Every time that task was my 7th time, and I was like, all right, I got this. Then I hand it over, and that's made
let's just stop there for a second because I think it's worth repeating. It was like your 7th time. Like you weren't just like, oh, I'm gonna do a Loom video. If here's what I'm intending is gonna happen. You've done it 7 times now, so you've iterated your core process. You figured out at least the easier, simpler stuff of what works, what doesn't. You've carved out the basic road, and now you're like, all right, this is pretty much everything that they're gonna need. That's the part that you're sort of carving out, and you give that to the team.
Yep. Correct.
Which is funny because that's exactly what I was talking about when I was saying, like, I was using email as the example, which was a harder example to do that with. But that's what I was talking about when you say, oh, normally you do 100% of the email, but you're going to carve out 80% and you're going to give it to somebody else to do and have them do that part. So maybe that's the email you wouldn't do that with because that's such a tinier thing. But something like a YouTube video is a production process and requires all these different components to happen. That's an obvious one that you can do that, with, which is really cool. Because like you said, that technique alone freed up a ton of your time, right? Now in the beginning, again, you got to go through the process to figure out what the process is. That's how you do it. So you use the system to improve the system. Then you're going back and you're recording that, giving that, now you've offloaded that, and you've improved the capability of the person who just got it. And you're not giving them a ton of additional time. They don't need to spend a bunch of time because you've already figured out how to shortcut that because, of course, AI.
Yep.
It's kind of brilliant.
And then that also helps with their learning curve because that's like a way of learning. Like most people learn by seeing you click on it versus like I could do an SOP.
Yeah, doing it, right? Getting into it and going,
no
okay,
idea
here's how
what
we
I'm
do this.
talking
And they
about.
get more comfortable with it. And
Yeah.
they can eventually evolve the process, which is also nice, right? Because it's not up to like, they may find, oh, here's a better way to do a thumbnail. I figured out this other thing to do it because they're comfortable doing that.
You touched on something really interesting that I want to make sure that we're clear about, because I was interpreting you saying 80% as like 80% of good, like a B or B minus.
80% of finished.
Yeah, and you said 80% of the work. So So let's just make sure we're clear on this, right? Like, definitely AI and people, whatever you want to delegate, 80 to 90% of the actual work. Like, nope, you shouldn't have to do 100% of the work ever.
Yeah.
But you want to delegate that on your 5th time, your 7th time, your 10th time of doing that once it's not as variable anymore. So yes, you can offload most of what you do outside of like the part where you're a personality and you are a known thing, like especially in a personality driven business like us, like we need that part. I don't want to delegate when I think that they can do 80% as well as I could. They need to be at the 90 to 95% as well as my output in order for that to happen. Does that make sense? Like we have to know that when I'm handing it to them, that they can get 95% of the result. So I want them to do 80 to 90% of the work, but they need to be at about 90 to 95% of the result. Otherwise it's worthwhile. It's more work back to me, and I would rather do it myself.
Yeah.
And so, I have one more thought on this and then I'll hand it over to you, but just, I wrote down supply and demand. So like capability and capacity is another way of thinking of supply and demand. Ultimately, the demand curve, the demand for the owner of the business or the founder is always like the highest. And then the supply is always the lowest because you have all the stuff like running a business and running any day-to-day stuff you do. So you always want to so the way that you can create, but you should always be focusing on creating more demand, right? That's great. It's just that you need to offload that supply. So that's, again, if you're working on creating demand, then you should always be offloading 90% of that demand creation so you can create more demand. It's like this virtuous cycle, right? If I'm always having to do 100% of it, I can only create so much demand. My demand is capacity controlled. That's the capacity. Like I only have the capacity to create so much demand. But if you can do the other piece of it where you are offloading it and delegating, backfilling with other people who now have infinite capabilities and more capacity than you, then you can actually move the demand curve even further, which means that people are going to need you more, and you can either charge more because you have limited supply, or you can take on more customers and your supply is near infinite now. It's like this is basically the luckiest time to be alive, or the most fortunate time to be alive because of that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And it's something that was coming up for me. I wrote down was around the process and the difference between, because I think because I've felt like this before. And I know we've all gone through this where it's like, well, I don't know the thing I need to get done. And so how do I tell somebody to do the thing if I don't understand it? And I'm not going to be an expert in this. And so I need to hire somebody to do the thing. And there's a lot of owners that do that. And then they outsource to a vendor, and then the vendor screws everything up because the owner didn't really know what the process was. They didn't understand it enough to tell if it was good or not. And so what you're doing in this process part, when you're sort of going through your iterations, right? Like I need to learn how to do this, and you do it the first time and it's kind of like rough. Second time's a little bit easier. Third time's a little bit easier. Starting to see some efficiencies now. Fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, 7 to 10 times. Now you've got a pretty repeatable process. But I don't think that you need to get it to that point. Like I'm thinking in my head, somebody's going like, well, yeah, but how do you know if it was the 7th time you were done, or the 3rd time you were done, or the 10th time it was done, to be able to pass off to somebody? So in my head, I'm thinking like, that's the job of you, whoever the person is. We're going to talk from the owner's perspective here, but if that's what you're doing, you're trying to figure out how to get this process. When is it cooked enough to get it to somebody else so they can do it? I would suggest the way to think about that is, I understand the process of what's going on. I know that you got to take chocolate and you got to mix it with flour, eggs, and water, and you got to cook it, and it's going to make a cake, right? That's the process. When you understand that process, you're like, I get how the recipe works. I get this piece. And you give that recipe to somebody else. Their job is to figure out what is the best kind of chocolate. Their job is, what is the best kind of flour? What are the best type of eggs? For how long do you cook it? At what temperature? How does it change it? What about the different pans that we can use for cake that might change what it is, or how it does it? Or maybe can we maybe add some walnuts into it? And, do some different stuff or add icing or whatever. And they're now enhancing the various parts of that. So they improve the quality. So there's like process and quality. The process is just the recipe. The recipe stays the same over and over again, but then the quality of the components of the recipe are what get enhanced. And again, you can use AI for that, but so could they. And that's kind of what, so you can get it to a certain point where it gives you the process and it gives you that quality that you need up until that point, right? And again, I'm using we're talking about this assembly line sort of mentality here, and two different assembly lines. One is the components coming together, and two is the quality of the result, right? The finished product, the actual finished product. So it's like when you're doing your YouTube things, I think that was a good one because there's a lot of different moving components. Okay, here's how I do thumbnails. It doesn't mean this is how we do thumbnails forever and never ever try to do this. It's just like, here's what I'm looking for, blah, blah, blah. And you're communicating the recipe of how I want it to be contrast. I want it to have a human on it. And the reason is because that way you've got human connection and you see the eyes and blah, blah. And now they understand the reasoning that you had of creating a thumbnail. They understand the recipe. They can then change and adjust. Oh, humans are now on the left, or humans have to point now, or humans have to be outlined, or whatever the trends are. They will do all of that stuff because that improves the quality of a thumbnail, right? So that's where they're using their own specific capabilities, your own quality scores to improve the quality of the thumbnail. But the recipe of what a good thumbnail is still the same, So I don't know if that helps at all, but that was kind of like, I was just thinking about that, like, because I think there's a lot of people who go like, I don't know how to do stuff, so they just outsource it, or they just tell their team like figure it out.
Yeah.
But if you do that, you don't know if there is no feedback loop possible. That's what it is. There's no feedback loop because you can't tell them it's good. You can just be like yes or no, but that's not a great feedback loop. It should be yes because of this, this, and this, or no because of this, this, and this. But if you don't understand the process, you can't give them actual feedback. You can just say yes, that's it, or no, it's not.
It's really interesting, man. So as you were talking, I'm semi agreeing, and I think you're right in some ways, but then also the foodie in me is objecting a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I think there's some nuance to it, but I think that it makes sense. So, and I'll definitely land the plane on this one, but when you describe a recipe, the best recipes have fixed ingredients with exact amounts and fixed directions with exact ways to do it. Right. Yep. Now, if you get ingredients with no directions, like I've seen that, or it's like it's like in grams versus pounds or whatever like that, or versus ounces, you'll mess it up. Right. And so, or if it says like, hey, just take all the ingredients and throw it in the oven, those are not good recipes because the directions are poor. Yeah. Right. I think that oftentimes, and then if you switch out ingredients, then it's like, hey, I wanted you to make my brownies, the Sauer family brownies. Like, I just want you to do that. That's what I want because I've perfected over the years. I don't want you to switch out the ingredients. I don't want you to change a chocolate. It has to be this dumpy Hershey's chocolate. It can't be this thing because it changes things. So, and that's like when you want somebody to cook something, they stick to the recipe. A cook sticks to the recipe. Okay. I'm hiring you to cook. You're a line cook. You do my recipe. I'm the chef. I create the recipe in the first place. I master this thing, and then we hand it over. Then we put it into our cookbook. Then we put it into that thing. Now, I think this is actually, when you think about it, are you hiring cooks or are you hiring chefs? Mm-hmm. Are there too many cooks in the kitchen? Are you doing something where it's like, hey, we're stepping on each other? Because do you want to give the autonomy to somebody? Like a virtual assistant is a cook, right? You're hiring them to cook. Like, hey, cook this recipe 1,000 times. I don't care if you get bored with it or not. That's what you're doing. If you hire somebody who's a chef or who's like a chef in training, then you're actually saying, hey, this is the dish, but you have liberty to update it. You have liberty to make it better. Right. And I think that's usually a better result because they're in their own domain. It's not they don't have all the responsibility, but they have enough where they have a scaffolding that they can work with, right? So you don't want a non-chef to mess up with your ingredients. You don't want to cook to improvise. Like, and honestly, like I have recipes that my family has sent around, and like my mom has this broccoli salad recipe. 9 times out of 10 people make it. They don't make it as well because they don't follow the instructions. They're like, oh, I don't really like broccoli, so I put in cauliflower, and I didn't like this, so I did that. Or they just take entire stalks of broccoli.
Of course, it changes it. Yeah.
Yeah. Or like, oh, we don't eat bacon in our house, so we use tofu bacon or whatever. And it's like, okay, well, that's not this. And they're like, mine never turns out as good as yours. And it's like, I wonder why? Because you're a cook who's acting like a chef. Like, we didn't ask you to do that thing. And there's so many people that are really bad cooks because they can't follow freaking directions. Mm-hmm. But to be a chef, it's the next level beyond that thing. So it's like, yes, a bad cook is somebody who doesn't follow directions. And if you're hiring a cook, give them the best directions ever. Otherwise, give them no ambiguity. That's where the Loom video fits in and everything like that. If you're hiring a chef, then expect that they're going to be taking what your baby is and making it better or way worse and handling that thing. Now, if you want it, ultimately your business is going to thrive if you have more chefs or more sous chefs, more in training that can get to that point. That's going to give you more capability, more capacity. But make sure you know what business you're running and what business you're in, right? So I like that analogy a lot, but also it's just sort of the reality check, right? Are you at the end looking at the quality control in every dish? Are you going to Gordon Ramsay it if it's not exactly how you want it? Or are you going to be like celebrating that, hey, they made it a little bit better because they understand that. They put their culture into it. They put their values into it. Vince, our video editor, he's putting his values into it. It's not exactly following my instructions, but he made our thumbnails better. He's doing different cuts than I would have done, but it's better. And I gave him that autonomy. I was like, hey, here's what I'm doing. I'm just doing it to get the job done. I want you to improve on this recipe. And he's doing it. And that's awesome. Like when you have team members who are like, hey, I'm sick of following the recipe. I think I can do it better. And then they do it better. That's amazing. And that's what I think you can do. But it's not an overnight thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. You go back to your recipe analogy. Like there are certain recipes where you understand you need to have a certain level of quality. Right? Yeah. All recipes are that though, right? So there's the recipe that I might have that's like, hey, here's this cake in a box. It's good enough. Add eggs, add water, throw in a pan, done. Right. And then you've got your 75 thing, step out because you're more of a foodie. You've got a different level of quality because you have a different level of recipe for that. Right. Yep. And my thing would be like, this is good enough for me. I need you to go through it. Then I need you to go. And to your point, it's not. So yes, it's a little bit of like you could hire the chef but that's more money, right? Because it's just, you got to pay more in the marketplace for that. But I really love using this AI because we can be for the AI first business perspective. You are able to take that person who doesn't have the capability, doesn't have the capacity and say, now you do. Like, here's the thing I'm giving you. I need you to go through. You work with AI and ask it how to make the cake better. Right. And then AI says, oh, here's all the recipes that are doing. Yes, go ahead and model. As long as you understand the result I'm trying to get and the quality level, right, which is what's defining the result, right, a certain level of quality. And that feedback loop is on there. And I've communicated so they can do this on their own without me having to be involved. Right. They can naturally evolve the recipes, like you were saying, which is, exactly what Vince did. So I think that, that I like that recipe analogy because there is those two levels. There's the steps and this is the steps that produce the quality. So I guess any final thoughts before?
My final thought is that not every recipe requires a chef. Simple can be delicious. Simple can be extremely delicious. And bottlenecks come from this idea of perfectionism and thinking that you need to chef your way out of everything. You don't need to. A chef is ultimately responsible for the end result, but not micromanaging things. And so you got to find that balance. It can be delicious and simple. You don't need to micromanage everything. Pick your battles and realize that ultimately when you can take the supply and make it infinite, that means you can create infinite demand. And that's how you're going to grow your business faster than ever.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love that you can't chef your way out of it all the time. And I love the idea of keeping things simple because that's the other thing is looking at AI and saying, hey, how do I simplify this? That's a really good question to ask your AIs if you haven't done that already. So definitely take advantage of that. With that, this is going to officially wrap up this Business Unfiltered edition of the Profit School podcast, of course, brought to you by Measure U. You've got a couple of options at this point. So if any of this has sort of created a new thought, new concept, new idea, new action step, talk to other people about it so you get it really integrated. Obviously, if you want to share this podcast in that conversation, we'd love to do that, as many are starting to do. So thank you for that. Obviously sharing it, rating it in your favorite podcast platform, and ultimately being a part of the community. So whether they Measure U community, if you're in a measurement, you can do that. We've got that community there. We also have the Profit School community, which is what you ideally should be a part of if you're listening to this podcast, because that's all we're doing is talking about this AI first mentality and how do we as business owners adapt into this incredibly rapidly changing world. It's going to be a heck of a lot of fun, and we look forward to seeing you there. So again, with that, this wraps up this Business Unfiltered edition of the Profit School by Measure U podcast, and we will see you on the next episode. Take care.